Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who want to do more than just to get through the day. I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my husband Evan.
Hello.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us today on this wonderful Thursday.
Yeah, the week's just zooming by, isn't it?
It is. It always does.
And it feels like that for us because we're recording many of these on the same day, but can't believe it's Thursday already.
So since it's Thursday, we are going to talk about being connected, which ideally this is our connection with the Lord, but it also is our connection to other people, because that's really where our strength as Christians comes from.
Sure. But we also need patience in both of those relationships. I mean, God often, like we said earlier in the week, doesn't work quick enough.
Instantaneously.
And definitely people don't work quickly enough either sometimes.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, 1 Corinthians 13, where it talks about love is patient and how we're commanded to be patient, but it is so hard to be patient with people. It's hard to be patient, when you see someone who is making the same mistakes over and over again. I was thinking about in the Gospels where Jesus says, Peter asks how often we should forgive. How many times should I forgive? And Jesus says, well, if your brother comes to you 70 times and says, I repent, then forgive him.
Yeah.
It's hard, when people make the same mistakes. And I know for me, it's especially hard when I see someone making easily fixable things. Like choices that are... that lead to pain and suffering that would be fairly easy to change in the beginning. And it's just like, can't you see that long term you're setting yourself up for a world of hurt?
Yeah.
Or something that's simple to fix, but they don't like the solution.
Why does that bother you so much, do you think?
I think it's because
you care about them.
Yeah, it's because I care. Because I hate watching people have a harder time than they need to. Mm-hmm. We all need a certain amount of struggle in our lives in order to grow, but it just seems like, okay, that's a dumb place to struggle, It's I don't know what it is for me. It's like watching somebody who, runs to alcohol. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so this is going to destroy your liver eventually. Like, we know this. Sure. There are plenty of studies to prove this. It's not like, can I tell? Is this possibly going to cause problems long term? It's like, no, this is going to cause problems long term.
Yeah, I think you just have this amazing sight too, and a lot of wisdom as far as what works and what doesn't, and you've learned so much along the way.
That could be. I definitely am always thinking, like, what's this going to do in 10 years from now?
There's some things that are obvious to you that aren't obvious to other people.
It seems like common sense.
Yeah, well, there's this great, and I think it has to do with perspective and what people have learned along the way. There's this church development program called NCD, and I'm not going to remember what those letters for. I think it's natural church development. And our church is just, you kind of survey the people in your church and you kind of take a pulse and then you try to figure out what needs worked on. And anyway, one of the cartoons that they have in their slide deck that keeps coming up that this made me think about is, and maybe, I don't know if you've seen this, there's these guys pulling a wagon and the wagon's full of wagon wheels, but the wagon wheels that are on the wagon are square. Uh-huh. And so the guys are just working as hard as they can trying to pull this wagon and I guess they're hauling the wagon wheels to market, who knows, but they're full of the solution.
Perfectly round wagon
And so
wheels.
we see that and we're like, just get rid of those square wheels, right? And it's oblivious to the guys for some reason.
I know. I feel like I do that. I don't even know how many times a week. It drives me nuts watching somebody do that. I'm just like, you are making your life difficult and God has called you to do so much more with your life. And here you are wasting your time on something fairly trivial that's sucking up all your time and energy.
So
anyway, sorry.
But for you to be patient with them is to try to not get sucked down into that.
Oh yeah, I know. It's something I'm working on. One of the things that I wrote down is, going back to that example with our promised land that we talked about on Tuesday in Exodus 28, where God says, I'm not going to drive everybody out in a year, because otherwise the land will be overtaken by wild animals and become desolate. Instead, I will drive them out little by little so that as you increase, you can possess the land.
Yeah. Otherwise, it turns wild again, and you've got to work extra hard to tame it again, to tame the land and the animals and whatever.
So I think, for me, part of my being patient with other people is to just say, maybe this is God, growing them to the point where they can handle their promised land. Maybe they need to drag a wagon with square wheels so that their arms can be extra strong later,
Yeah, we don't know. And I think that's the point. I mean, patience has so much to do with just accepting the why question as unanswered often. God's
and trusting that God has a good answer to it. That he's not just like letting people go through difficulties just for kicks.
Yeah. That's right. And it's because he knows their heart better than we do, and he's orchestrating their situation. I think when I struggle with being patient with people, I thought of like this emo song from Homestar Runner where it's like, no one understands me.
I totally had that in my head as soon as you said emo song from Homestar Runner.
It's like, I'm trying to do something. I'm either trying to communicate maybe, or I'm trying to do right now, right? I'm just trying to say some stuff. And then if it doesn't seem like it's working, I'm getting impatient with them.
What do you mean by that? Just kidding.
Yeah. And so that's a growing opportunity for me. So, but I'm sure even perfect communicators are going to struggle with that too. Like, it's just sometimes you don't know if it's you or the listener or a little bit of both or whatever. But if we're called to speak, and, I feel like I'm doing some stuff that's part of my calling, being elder at church, and we're making this podcast, and there's different things, putting a voice out there. That's a step of faith for me. I'd be more content to just be more of an introverted type of person. So there's some of that frustration there of like, why isn't this working? Why don't they understand what I'm trying to say? Getting impatient with that kind of a process is what I thought about. And I think part of the solution is understanding that that's what's happening. And if genuine emotions come up, let them come up too. Like if I get a little angry about that, or if that person's getting frustrated with me, let's let that happen too. Instead of trying to just kind of stifle all that. 'Cause that could stifle growth too.
Right. Yeah, we want to leave margin for those things. I was thinking about in that definition that we've been reading this week, where it talks about, it's the definition for patience from the Complete Word Study Dictionary, the New Testament. The word is macrothumia. And I was thinking about that part that says self-restraint before proceeding to action. The quality of a person who is able to avenge himself yet refrains from doing so. And I was thinking about how that is such a perfect balance there. Because you have, if you're thinking about those balance skills, like you have the ability to avenge yourself and the patience not to do so, and the self-restraint. And I think sometimes we get those mixed up. We think that patience means suppressing those feelings, like you were talking about, where there is no need to avenge yourself because there's nothing there, nothing to see, no one behind the curtain, And so we have to actually experience the offense, like we talked about last week with forgiveness, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. We want to not minimize what's happening, because patience is actually dealing with that. It's, having self-control in the middle of difficult circumstances. It's not ignoring self-control or ignoring circumstances. It's both, which I think is so key. Like in Romans 4, where it talks about how Abraham, faced the fact that he was as good as dead as far as having a child, but did not waver in faith. Like we have to do both.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we get into trouble when, I love that definition where it talks, the ability to avenge, but choosing not to. I think sometimes, though, we think we have more power than we do. And then we start to think, like when I hear that avenge, it's like, I'm going to go solve the problem, right? So I guess it's similar action, like choosing not to do that. But I think sometimes we rush out there with our sword waving and we can't actually avenge anything.
Right.
And that's definitely wasted energy. But I guess the appropriate response either way is to stay and to be a little still and to let God act.
Yeah, that part of that patience with others is that the knowledge that God is constantly at work in them. Even when it feels like it's been forever.
Yeah. And another thing with relationships is, you and I, we love to see relationships grow and, get to be better and better friends and all this stuff. But we both get frustrated when the relationship doesn't seem like it's moving fast enough,
right.
Or like,
it's not really going anywhere.
I really want to be friends with this person. And it seems like being friends could be a really great thing. Why isn't it happening faster? But being patient enough to let the relationship develop at the appropriate speed. So it takes a little bit of prodding and intentionality and initiation, but it doesn't take
like planting a seed.
That's right. But it doesn't take micromanaging. And that you don't dig up the seed every day and see if the roots are growing yet.
And you plant the seed and then you water it and stuff. You don't just leave it alone, pretend like it's not there. It's hard to just let it go at its own pace. There's no way to take a seed that takes 45 days to germinate and make it germinate in 15 days. It just,
Yeah, patience is waiting is built in.
Right.
Patience can happen in our heart, and we have great opportunities to learn patience all the time.
Yeah, I think that's the other reason why patience is so hard. Because it's like all the CSCs, it is completely internal.
Yeah.
It can look the same on the outside, but there's just that peace and joy and abundance that comes from applying them on the inside.
I think one way to kind of act out patience with the frustration that we feel with relationships, prayer is such a big part of this. And I think this could be a method or a little thing to practice is when there's frustration with a friend, we need to be appropriate and honest about like, hey, this hurt my feelings or whatever. Like there's some appropriate level of grievance airing and things like that. But if it becomes overwhelming and you just want to dump on the person, to redirect that to God in your prayer and be like, this guy really, he just doesn't get it and he doesn't understand, and like blow that steam off because God can handle it and that person might not be able to. And that would be a kind of patience because then you're not giving them the tongue lashing.
Yeah. Well, that's something that's a prayer thing that I've kind of a prompt that I've learned is like, anytime I start going, this person, it's like watching a slow motion train wreck. And then, when I get frustrated about that, yes, I definitely still rant, but being able to use that as a prompt for like, okay, maybe God's put that on my heart because I need to pray for them.
Maybe they need prayer. Yeah.
Maybe they need God to open their eyes to their slow motion train wreck or something.
Well, that's a great prayer. Yeah. Our eyes open. We want to have open eyes ourselves. We want our friends and our children and all of our relationships. We want to see, the God's world, the world we live in, not whatever fantasy world we've kind of built around ourselves.
Totally.
And that takes patience and prayer.
As always, pick whether today is going to be awesome or not, whether you're going to strengthen those neural pathways to look for the good things in your life and the good things God has done and is doing. We love you guys, and we are praying for you. Hopefully you guys are having a good week, that you're really able to use these reminders to change how you're doing things.
Yeah, that's our prayer for the show, that it would actually make a difference.
Yeah. Come back tomorrow and we are going to discuss patience in circumstances. All right. Have an awesome Thursday, you guys.